In 1881, a committee of elite British scholars published a highly anticipated revision to the English Bible. The public expected a light update to the 1611 text, but the committee delivered a radical departure from the traditional translation. The mandate from the Convocation of Canterbury in 1870 was strict. The committee was authorized to remove plain and clear errors from the King James Version of 1611. They were instructed to introduce as few alterations as possible. Instead of minor corrections, the committee executed over 36,000 alterations to the English text. This sheer volume of alterations fractured the familiar rhythm of the English New Testament. Publishers immediately began printing the two versions in parallel columns, forcing a direct comparison between the historic text and the new revision. The scale of these changes points to a cause deeper than heavy-handed copy editing. Every radical shift in the English wording indicates a massive, unapproved structural alteration hidden beneath the text. John William Burgon, an Oxford scholar and Dean of Chichester, systematically documented how this happened. Burgon argued that the committee overstepped their authority. They swapped the foundational Greek source text, while the public expected a simple English revision. Up until 1881, English translations were based on the Textus Receptus. The Textus Receptus, or received text, is the Greek text that represents the broad historical consensus of manuscripts used continuously by the Eastern Church for centuries. Two Cambridge professors on the committee, Brooke Foss Westcott and Fenton John Anthony Hort, persuaded the group to abandon this consensus. They convinced the revisers to adopt their own, unpublished Greek proofs instead. By altering the Greek foundation itself, the committee guaranteed a radically different output, completely circumventing their mandate to only make necessary English corrections. The most immediate consequence of this methodology was severe linguistic damage to the English text. The translation adopted an extreme mechanical literalism. The revisers applied a philosophy of formal equivalence. This translation method forces a single word in the source language to always translate as the exact same word in the target language, regardless of grammar or context. Take the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, verses 45 and 46. In a span of just 34 words, the revisers made 19 separate alterations. This chart shows the authorized version on the left and the revised version on the right. By forcing a strict one-to-one word mapping, the translation strips the text of its natural English idiom and fluidity. Contemporary scholars immediately criticized the work. They noted that the English had become stiff, jerky, and constrained. When a translation fails the basic syntactical rules of its own receptor language, it points to a flawed underlying academic methodology. That flawed methodology traces directly back to the specific Greek framework Westcott and Hort constructed to replace the traditional text. The traditional text was backed by a massive evidentiary consensus. It relied on thousands of surviving manuscripts, early church translations, and patristic quotations spanning 15 centuries. Westcott and Hort discarded this 1,500-year consensus in favor of extreme isolationism. They relied almost exclusively on two outlier manuscripts from the 4th century, Codex Vaticanus, known as B, and Codex Sinaiticus, known as Aleph. A codex is an ancient manuscript in book form rather than a continuous scroll. These two documents are highly idiosyncratic. They frequently disagree with each other, and both contain massive omissions not found in the rest of the manuscript tradition. Burgon likened their approach to an inverted pyramid. They were balancing the entire weight of the New Testament text precariously on two highly divergent data points. Replacing a massive historical consensus with just two anomalous documents is a catastrophic failure of basic evidence weighting. To justify ignoring 99% of the historical manuscript evidence, Westcott and Hort needed a compelling theoretical reason. They invented the Syrian recension. This hypothesis claims that church leaders in Antioch systematically gathered, edited, and standardized the Greek text during the late 3rd or early 4th century. The core claim is that this newly edited, standardized text was then propagated by ecclesiastical authority throughout the empire, artificially replacing the older, purer texts. Burgon presented a fatal refutation. There is absolutely no historical record of such a massive, empire-wide revision ever taking place. Every church historian, every ecumenical council, and every writer from that era fails to mention an event that would have required immense coordination across multiple continents. The Syrian recension is a phantom theory. It is a complete fiction, constructed solely to provide an excuse for dismissing overwhelming opposing evidence. Westcott and Hort's defense rested on a common assumption, that the oldest physical manuscripts must inherit the purest text. Burgon applied counterintuitive genealogical logic. He demonstrated that the most accurate and highly valued manuscripts were actively used in daily liturgical life. Because they were read constantly, these accurate scrolls were eventually worn out, read to pieces, and destroyed by the elements. The text of those documents survived only because scribes faithfully copied them into numerous descendants before the physical originals degraded. Codices B and Aleph survived physically intact for over a millennium, precisely because their numerous errors and omissions made them unusable. The early church simply set them aside on a dark shelf. Physical survival in the manuscript record often indicates a document that was neglected due to its flaws, not one that was revered for its purity. The real-world cost of this methodology is visible in specific high-stakes doctrinal passages, like 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16. The traditional reading states, "God was manifest in the flesh," a reading supported by the vast consensus of history. The Revised Version changed this to "He who was manifested," relying exclusively on the outlier manuscripts. The revisers executed this drastic alteration silently. They failed to provide the public with the marginal warning their initial mandate explicitly required for text changes. The traditional reading is backed by a massive cascade of early church fathers and ancient translations spanning multiple regions. The revised reading stands on the solitary, thin pillars of Codices B and Aleph. This verse encapsulates the revision's failure. A vital text was evacuated based on blind trust in a tiny fraction of corrupted evidence. Looking back at the 1881 Revised Version project, the historical record shows immense academic overreach. Despite the elite academic pedigree of the revisers, their final work was a literary and commercial failure. The public quickly rejected the awkward text. The project collapsed under its own weight, producing a stiff, mechanical English translation built on top of a highly speculative, unproven Greek theory. As Burgon established, a diverse genealogical consensus cannot be overturned by the mere physical survival of isolated, corrupted documents. The 1881 revision's collapse is a permanent warning. Prioritizing theoretical innovation over historical consensus results in the erosion of the text itself.